Okay, folks. Welcome to episode two of Talk Bigfoot with the IBRO. I'm your host, Chris Dawson. As we suggested last week, I may not always be your host. We've got loads of members who are eagerly waiting to jump up onto the bandwagon, including my guest tonight, who may be interested in interviewing a few people in his time. But the guy who I've got on tonight is the vice chairman for the Irish Bigfoot Research Organisation here in Ireland. He's currently in England, working at the moment, but he has had a wide interest, especially in the historical side of Bigfoot across the world, not just in Ireland or Europe, but across the world. And it is Aodhan MacArtain, and Aodhan is joining us. You're joining us from England, Aodhan, are you?
That's correct. I'm currently in Liverpool, Chris, working, but I'm originally from Belfast, and I have a place in the Mournes, which I go to numerous times throughout the year, at least 6 times per year. And then back, of course, visiting family. So I do a lot of independent research and collective research with friends in that area of the Mourne Mountains for the woodbush or Bigfoot.
Awesome. And Aodhan, just to give the folks a wee bit of a intro into yourself before you maybe go into the wee book that you've written. Um, what actually sparked your interest in Bigfoot in the first place?
Well, there was an interest from very young. My mind probably plays tricks on me, but I would say that it was going to watch Harry and the Hendersons in Belfast in the 80s. I
Hmm.
thought, I thought it was real at that age, and that
Yeah,
sparked an interest into research in my local library, following books on the Yeti, the Tintin stories, the stories of adventurers in the Himalayas, and other books into prospectors, uh, i.e. Louis Lamar type prospectors, writing books of encountering strange mythical beasts in the Pacific Northwest of America. That
awesome.
gave me an interest. And then obviously you do more and more research, and your breadth of knowledge gets bigger, and you understand that it's not just the Himalayas and it's not just North America. There's uh, stories and myths and actual information on the wild man throughout many, many countries and continents.
Of course, it is like obviously it is a worldwide phenomenon, and to many people listening to this, maybe people across the pond listening to this here, maybe I've never thought of a Bigfoot being in Ireland or in the UK or any of those places. I mean, there is rumours going around probably of Eastern Europe and places like that, but certainly in your view on the Irish Bigfoot alone, obviously it's the same thing here as it is elsewhere.
Of course it is. If you look at, I think it was last year, a few lads up in Lough pulled out 12-foot antlers. 12 foot. Now, I mean, I'm what, 5'10" of
Hmm.
a stag or large deer type, which was on the island of Ireland for millennia. They pulled that out of the loch. Now, if the Irish ecosystem can sustain an animal of that size, which it does, and it easily can do, there is every possibility of an Irish Bigfoot operating, I believe, in the Mournes and possibly all around the island. You have to understand, though, Chris, Ireland is very, very sparsely populated. It's a wild country. There's people disappear all the time in them woods. There is, I believe, something in the woods in Ireland along the Bigfoot type. It might be a different evolutionary tract of the American Bigfoot or the Wendigo or of the Yeti, more in relation to the Gigantopithecus strain of Bigfoot operating in Ireland. The food's there, the location's there, and it's rural enough where you're not going to encounter them all the time. There's myths and legends going back for centuries of the Irish wild man. Why hasn't someone existed there until today?
Yeah,
And there's also a lot of proof, a lot of activity, a lot of people out doing research looking for this who do have different forms of evidence to back up my claims that there is an Irish Bigfoot.
yeah, and of course you were just mentioned there that the guys in Lough pulled out 10-foot antlers. Of course, Ireland was connected with the rest of with Britain and with Europe not so long ago, only a few thousand years ago. The ice
Yeah, there,
melted.
there was a land bridge.
Oh yeah, and I mean the ice only melted then. Of course, they find mammoth bones here. So if mammoths can get to Ireland, then of course a Bigfoot can.
Of course, and Ireland does have a low population, and there's only 2 or 3 real cities. It's mainly rural. So obviously there's agriculture, mountains, woods. There's the system to effectively feed and a habitat to create for a Bigfoot to remain undocumented within Ireland
100%.
for centuries.
100%.
And if you look back at Irish folklore and myths, you're always told not to go into the woods, but by your granny, your granddad, your grandparents, because there's something in there and nobody knows what it is and nobody's ever specific. You could be effectively encroaching on a Bigfoot's territory, wildman or woodbush, within the Irish woods. There's definitely something there. We, on research in the mornings, constantly finding little pebbles arranged bizarrely. You know, a child's not going to do this. You're finding bits of wood which are broken physically. I can't break them. You know, there's not huge guys going around snapping twigs of wood in half. There's something strong there, and obviously I know for a fact that there's nesting sites dotted throughout where people normally are, and it looks like hides where people are watching people. You know, with twigs and branches arranged in such a way that I can't conceivably see people doing. So it's an intelligent possible woodbush offshoot of Bigfoot, I feel, operating in Ireland.
Yeah, and of course, before we get any deeper, Aidan, before we go any further, I'll just get the people to know you a little bit better. And you have written a book on the subject, yeah?
I wrote. Couldn't do any research on lockdown, so it effectively went on to the internet. People have to understand that the objective, I feel, of Bigfoot is to go out into the woods, and not just the woods, into different environments and see if they can find traces, tracks. But if you can't do that, the internet's a good option. Bigfoot's been around long before the internet, so for millennia. So I wrote a book when I was sitting at home, Bigfoot Collective Discourse in the Internet Age, just on some topics that I like, fairly selfish. I thought, well, I'll try and send them out. I'll do a info pamphlet for some friends and family, and I'll stick it on Amazon. Some topics that I discussed in it were the Yeti in the Himalayas, the skunk ape in southern US, Sasquatch Pacific Northwest, and the Yowie in Australia, they're all very well documented throughout centuries.
And that's on Amazon then, and people can get that up on Amazon then.
Yeah, that's it. Bigfoot Collective Discourse on the Internet. A lot of friends and family about it, a lot of people in work about it. But there's been, I think, around 700 copies sold. But I have done no advertising on whatsoever. So there is definitely a grasp of people who are interested in the Bigfoot phenomenon and want to do more research on it. So it's done quite well. I'm quite pleased with it. It's just an info pamphlet, information for other Bigfooters to try and get together. You can find a lot of it on the internet and doing independent research from different sources, and any source has been accredited within the book.
Well, that's pretty cool. I would love to be able to sit down and write, stuff on it, on the subject, but writing was never really my thing. I am actually pretty good, I have to say, at English and stuff like that. I passed all the grades and all, but it's a thing that I don't think I ever get the time to do it again, because I'm probably a bit different than yourself. I would choose going to something else, or doing something else, or watching YouTube on Bigfoot, rather than sitting down and writing something myself. And I think to be able to take that step and do that is definitely something else,
Oh, it was excellent. I was doing a lot of research on the Delative Pass incident, where the Russian Spetsnaz was out searching for Yeti in that area, and 9 hikers died. I was doing a lot of research into the Yowie, because I actually have family in the Blue Mountains in Australia, and they take it as a given. Like it's not something that's questioned. They think that yes, there is something in that woods, and we don't know what it is, and we call it the Yowie. So it's but you're all right in the sense to sit down and write it. It's a subject that I enjoy, and it's a subject I know other people enjoy. So I just put the info book together with the certain topics which I prefer. like I done a lot of research on the skunk ape, which I thought was phenomenal for Bigfoot cousin to be operating down in Florida with completely different credentials from the Bigfoot that operates in the Pacific Northwest. I find it really interesting. I don't know if other people, but I assume other people will, because it's a huge population who enjoy Bigfoot.
So, guys, as I mentioned at the start, there Aidan is a lot into the sort of the historic end of Bigfoot, as well as the modern stuff. And can I ask Aidan what you would feel about this? A lot of people, especially here in Ireland, the researchers here believe that basically the woodlouse is the Almasty of northwestern Russia, Eastern Europe. That is basically the same thing. Like, it's like a Neanderthal. It wouldn't be a Neanderthal, but maybe something along those lines. But certainly connected with the
I have
Almas.
heard this before, Chris. And I understand why people would think that, due to the land bridge, due to the different evolutionary offshoots. Are we going to have the same type of Bigfoot as Indonesia? Obviously not. We have a completely different climate, completely different environment, completely different ecosystem. Are we going to have the same Yeti principle type of the Himalayas, China, around the India? No, I don't think so. We are going to have something fairly similar to something that has a climate and a system like ours. Whether it be the Almasty, I know that there was a documented case in Norway of a woodlouse. I think it was the 12th century King Konags. It's in a historical Norwegian document. And I feel that would be similar to what we have in Ireland. I think I posted a picture online of it from the 13th century.
Right.
But a mocked up one. I think that we would have, in relation to, in Ireland, definitely a Neanderthal cross type Bigfoot, similar to the Almasty, but possibly smaller and possibly a bit cleverer, just because of the environment where we live. If you look within Ireland, there's obviously wild men living in the woods and rural who have no contact with state or institutions. Of course there is. In relation to someone that doesn't want to be found, you could easily do that in Ireland. Is it very similar? We're not as cold as Russia, so.
Well, of course, a lot of Irish researchers, including myself, Aidan, would well, they wouldn't even argue about it. They would suggest it more so than argue that there actually is two species here, and one of them is the woodlouse, and the other one is the grey man, better known as the Irish Bigfoot or the Sasquatch.
Yes. Well, the woodlouse, I think, no problem. The grey man, yes, depending on what's. Would that be the same as the Almasty? No, it would be a different offshoot. Possibly a cousin or a brother or an uncle.
Yeah,
well,
from a lot bigger anyway. So I would suggest going by the reports of the witnesses' reports and sightings that there clearly is a creature that is similar, to the European woodlouse, which would be more Neanderthal looking. Like people have described it between a Neanderthal and a chimp, and about 7 foot tall, and yet other people have described seeing the traditional 10-foot tall Sasquatch built like a brick, and a lot different than the woodlouse.
See, I don't doubt any of them sightings. When we had an environment there not too long ago that was supporting huge deer, bears, everything that's other environments are supporting, climate's change and everything else. Whether you believe it or not. I mean, could a Bigfoot type grey man be operating in Ireland? Of course it could. There's the system there. I believe that it would be omnivorous. Would possibly have a large. Well, their teeth collection would be able, and their stomach would be able to process different roots and different vegetables, and some sort of berry or plant type system to support itself. Then, if you look at the Irish countryside, there's nothing but animals all over it. We're wildly populated, so there's easily the system to support and feed a number, albeit a small number of grey men within the Irish countryside.
Of course,
I'd say possibly a few families.
The grey man is more at home with sightings and reports in the northwest, northeast of Scotland, but there has been reports in parts of even southern England of the grey man, and of course there's been reports here too. There's actually been 3, 4, 5 reports of the grey man in my local area inside the last 18 months alone, and that's actually alongside the woodwose reports in the same area.
There's definitely some activity then in that area. I mean, definitely, if people are out researching and finding it, I don't doubt for a second that there is something operating within many parts of Ireland. If you're talking a hair-covered beast that's stealing cattle and effectively feeding itself off the land, there's easily the system to support that. But where are you saying in Ireland? What part?
Well, I wouldn't give off an exact location, but in North Armagh, North County Armagh,
Yeah.
there is reports of both types. In a very small, within 10 miles of each other, there's been reports of both types.
See, then I think that with agriculture expanding, we're going more and more into their habitat, which is bringing them closer to human contact, where they would stay effectively hidden. They're having to come out more, and because people are now camera phones and out, the population is greater. We're encountering more and more of the grey men, of Bigfoot type creatures who have no choice but to come closer to human contact to feed themselves and their families.
You see, Ian, it was always like from when I started doing this here. I'm not sure about you, in Ireland here. I'm talking just really on Ireland at the moment. But from when I started doing it, there was always the reports of the grey man there, the big Sasquatch type creature, and the woodwose alongside that. But most of those Bigfoot reports, as opposed to the woodwose, were sort of more in the northeast, in County Antrim, the Glens of Antrim, things like that, and out the west, Donegal, Killeader, Big Dog Forest, and right down the west sort of the west half of Ireland, right down until Limerick, and of course the Mourne Mountains, the Cooney Mountains, and places like that. And the woodwose sort of any activity that I've heard about with the woodwose, it always seems to go for the smaller forests, the bogs, the places like that. And to be quite surprisingly, this particular grey man has been seen in what is clearly woodwose territory, and the woodwose are still there. So my reckoning is that this guy actually was kicked out of his clan, and he's moved home into. And I'm not saying that the woodwose have accepted them into his clan, but he's certainly making himself at home anyway.
Well, there's certainly a possibility of a fallout of a challenge to alpha status, and the woodwose might take them in. I don't know what their interactions are like, but there's certainly a possibility where there's been a challenge and the challenge hasn't went well, or a falling out within the camp, or a degree of jealousy, and that they have to have moved out of their territory and into effectively woodwose territory. But I'm unsure. I know the grey man operates in Scotland. It's certainly possible that he could be up around the north of Ireland.
It's funny too, it's funny there's been no real reports of that further south on the eastern side of Ireland, but there is activity that would suggest the grey man right down, as I say, right down the western side of Ireland. But your research that you've done, Aidan, in the Mournes, as you mentioned at the start, you've done a lot of research around the Mournes. It's a known fact that the woodwose, the Neanderthal type, the more human type of Bigfoot, doesn't create structures, right? It's a pretty known fact that they don't create structures, right? And the big grey man does. So, do you think maybe that there's a chance that you're actually dealing with the grey man in the Mournes and not the woodwose at all?
Well, you're possibly dealing with. There are structures there. There is nesting. There is sightings. There is snap branches. There is a number of gift giving. That you couldn't really class as human activity due to the strength, due to the nature of them. There's definitely a possibility of you know the size of the Mourne Mountains, you know the area, you know the ecosystem could it sustain a large grey man within that? Of course it could. Could they be, as you think, kicked out of a clan and looking for its own territory? Definitely. Definitely.
Of course.
The Mourns is it's such a big, wide open, vast space. A lot of it, some of it might be completely undiscovered. No, people think, oh well, Ireland's small. That's not entirely true. There's huge areas of open space and of woodland all around Sleep Donard and across the north. Really, could a grey man, as you're suggesting, be fairly nomadic, go on its own away from the clan? Could it be hunting for more space for food due to humans encompassing its habitat? That's an easy possibility. We have there's wolves that hunt 400 miles per day. So could a grey man effectively go look for fresh grounds, fresh habitat to support itself or its clan, or as an independent, through to getting challenged in the alpha and losing and leaving effectively its clan? Definite possibility. Of course it could. Well, of course it could, yeah. And in the Mourns, there's a number of sightings, number of livestock going missing, dogs barking for no reason, people feeling they're being watched in the forest. Definitely, there's something there. I believe that it's an Irish Bigfoot that's operating in the Mourns, and I think there's a number of them. I think it's a small family of them personally. You're saying that it referenced as the grey man, but yes, is it a solitary one?
No,
hunting for further grounds.
Not.
It could be,
but unlikely in the Mourns. I would say there's probably at least a family group, if not a clan.
Yeah, well, there's such a space there. You know, it would be almost impossible to pin down one, a family easily, and that could be why there's so many sightings. There's so many effectively discoveries, contacts, acoustics that people come across, or unexplained structures, unexplained gifts. I can tell you now that forest animals aren't arranging stones, pebbles, different woods in formations. They're just not. People aren't going that far into the moors to do that. That's an intelligent animal, an intelligent, effectively primate that could, I believe, be as what you're referring to as the grey man or an Irish Bigfoot.
The grey man, obviously, he gets his name because he's grey, but that doesn't mean to say that they're all grey, of course. And
there's loads of different types.
People likely seeing a grey Bigfoot is they're likely have seen an older Bigfoot, and the rest of them are normally black or brown or whatever. But the guy who's been seen around this area has been grey. So obviously that's why I was asking, maybe do you think that because he's so old, he's got to a certain age where the younger males have just booted him out and he's had to come out of his usual area and head into bogland out of the way, maybe,
It could be sick of his rule and ask him to leave. It's certainly possible. It happens in a number of clan type situations. But in relation to the different colours, I think they're more develop around their environment, and that's what colour they are. But I understand the grey man. I have a few grey hairs myself, so I understand with the age.
Yeah. But Aidan, one point that I want to put to you, and I have to hold my hands up here because I have actually found the evidence myself as well. One of the things that does hold to this theory of the two species in Ireland is obviously the prints, right? And there is clearly two different sets of prints, completely different. Obviously, we all know, anybody who knows about Bigfoot knows the Sasquatch print. They know what one looks like, don't they? But the woodmoose print is more squared. Sasquatch Bigfoot would be long, and wide at the top, where the woodmoose print is more squared. And we have obviously found both sets of those prints. And both sets of those prints have actually been found in my area, and I have found them myself in my area as well. And that obviously would suggest definitely to me that there is two species, and that possibly one of the big grey men has been booted into that area, and living alongside the woodbush as well, you know.
Definitely, it's not that unusual. I would assume a similar diets. It's a location which is, well, it's sparsely populated by humans, so that would be inviting towards woodbush or greyman. Do they live alongside each other in harmony? I'm not 100% sure. Could they operate in the same area? Yeah, but they would then be competing for the same resources. Do you understand what I mean, Chris? The prints obviously don't lie. Do you know what I mean? If there's two fairly similar, could one be watching the other? In relation
Probably.
to now, to compete for a location or habitat. That's, I might do some research on that myself.
Yeah. Well,
would be keeping an eye, thinking that we can take this land because of our environment being shrunken. Have you had any level of debate on that?
Well, my thought on that particular incident that I just spoke about is what I said. You know, I think that he has been booted out of his clan, and you know he's went into bogland, and that's not usually where they would go. You know, they're traditionally in the big forests where they like to make structures and all these different things.
Yeah.
And he has been in there, and obviously the woodbush have. I wouldn't say they've accepted him into the area, but they're sort of putting up with him just because he's bigger. Maybe it's as simple as that. You know, the woodbush are generally reported as 7 foot height and max.
Yes.
You know, where these guys are 10 foot tall, and it's probably just a matter of who's bigger that they're putting up with it. You know, but generally, you know, from what I've seen, obviously, as I said, my area is generally the woodbush, and I've had a lot of interactions with them. Found a lot of their prints, and I've found a lot of the Bigfoot prints as well now, in different areas, and I've found a few in that area as well. But I mean, I think you know what you were saying there. I don't think they certainly would let each other, you know, go ahead and have my food. I don't think that would happen. You know, I think
I don't think that would happen. I think they would become rivals quite quickly in a small location. And I think there would be a degree of competition for the actual resources of the area. Now, whether one is watching the other to see how see how they operate and see if they've weaknesses or what their strengths are, or whether there could be, in theory, a challenge. You're saying that the woodbush are putting up with it at the minute due to size and possibly not wanting to get injured. It's an interesting theory. It could well be.
It could well be.
An older greyman, which it does seem to be, if this one has been asked to leave the clan or been put out or been shunned for some reason. Probably effectively watching the woodbush to see where their food is stored, what they're eating, and where their areas are. It's an interesting theory.
Yep. Back to yourself then, Ian. Obviously, I don't want to ramble on too much about my own area, but in the moorings, obviously you've done a lot of research in the moorings and stuff like that there. But as I said at the start too, you're obviously living over in England at the moment. You're working in England. Have you ever done any research across the RC then?
I go to Cumbria quite a lot, and there's what the English call the green man living in the woods. It's a fairly similar. It's a more Neanderthal based, and it's been there for centuries. And there is some activity in Cumbria. It's a huge space. You find different types of prints, different types of what's called discardables. You'll see something like a fox that's, there's not many things that are eating foxes in England. And you see chunks taken out of it. And you're like, well, that would be effectively a discardable from supposedly a northwest English Bigfoot. Green man operating there. But there's increasingly more and more sightings across the whole country, especially down south. If you look at some of the reports online, big cats operating in different forest locations. So there's definitely an ecosystem in England to sustain a Bigfoot population, and I suppose in Scotland as well. Scotland's fairly similar environment to Ireland, but we go to, there's a few of us sometimes, lads who will go up to the northwest, the Lake District, and we will go out on sightings and stay overnight, trying to get acoustics or knocks. And it's actually not that uncommon over here now. I think from the advent of Finding Bigfoot, the TV program, there's a lot of people getting acoustics and knocks and finding nesting sites, unexplained phenomenon, i.e., dead animals, prints in the woods, within the lakes. Well, they're not woods; they're forests. They're huge scapes of land where populations of Bigfoot are operating, albeit small populations. I believe that a number of sightings across England and possibly Scotland could be the same groups of Bigfoot that are fairly nomadic in origin and follow different trails across the country, and a number of people are seeing the same group of Bigfoots. But no one, Chris, there's a report there's an old saying that says, no one sees what you see, even if they see it too. Two people can see the exact same thing and describe it completely differently.
Mm-hmm.
And in relation to Bigfoot, I think that's not an issue, do you know what I mean? Because people who come forward, are brave, and they've seen something and they want to explain it and they want to share it with people. But two people who see the same Bigfoot can describe it, I feel, differently. So if somebody's in, say, Cumbria on a hunt or doing some research and sees a large grey Bigfoot, say, walking the hillside, which isn't that uncommon, or moving through the forest, somebody in another part of the country a few weeks later can see it and describe it as a large green hairy man due to the environment that they're in. But they've seen the same thing. Do you understand me?
Mm-hmm.
They just, the mind isn't playing tricks on them. They've just seen they just describe things in different ways or remember it differently.
That would add up to one of my theories, Ian, about the puka. I'm sure you've heard about the puka here in Ireland, and it's supposed to be like a 4 foot to 5 foot tall creature with pointy ears and a pointy nose and stuff like that, covered in hair. And that goes back centuries in Ireland, right? Now, the problem that we have here in Ireland is what you mentioned, and of course, it's maybe a wee bit worse in Ireland because the guys get into the pub on a Saturday night, and maybe one of the guys have told them one thing, and then the other guy adds on a pair of pointy ears and a pointy nose or whatever.
Of course.
Do you know what I'm saying? So my point of view on the puka is that it's basically a misidentification of a juvenile Bigfoot. Do you think that would be anywhere close to what you would think?
I've seen that the Irish puka, the goblin, small, hairy. We do have reported sightings over here. It's very, very common in Cornwall if you're down doing research. Misidentification, is that an issue within the Bigfoot community? Of course it is. Is it described as something else due to, we haven't always had camera phones, Chris. We haven't always had all this access to technology. So within folklore, it's all came from somewhere. So if someone sees a small, hairy thing, they describe it as what they know it to be. They say, well, that's a little goblin, or that's a furry, or something that makes sense to them. Now that we're not more advanced in a different way, we're looking at things a bit differently. Could the puka of Irish Celtic myth and folklore be a small misidentified Bigfoot? Of course it could have.
Yeah.
Something that's been inquisitive. And as soon as we all get in the pub, it was 10 foot tall with a hairy tail. Oh no, it was 9 foot and it was made of gold. It's storytelling, and it's not, people aren't lying, people aren't making things up. They're just
it just gets added to, it gets expanded as each person tells a story.
Of course it does. Do you know what I mean? That's human nature, and we in Ireland are as guilty as anywhere else.
100%. Yeah.
That's the theory, and I've heard that theory before about the puka being misidentified.
And then of course, not just in Ireland now, but across the world, there's always the tales that you hear of the troll under the bridge, so to speak.
Yes.
And I have to say, before I get you to talk about this, before I actually had one of those encounters myself many, many moons ago. Whenever I was first starting into research, I had followed a few signs and stuff, we directional signs that they would leave along river routes, right? And I actually went up a river, and I came to this old canal bridge, right? And it was a real wet night. The rain was bouncing off the road basically. You know, it was one of those
Okay.
wet nights. It was umbrella and all the waterproofs on as well, and it was still getting wet. You know, but I come up to this canal bridge, and I thought I heard something moving under it. You know, even with all this rain, and I says, surely that couldn't be a. All these things go through your head. Couldn't be a deer down there because this river, this canal, has really steep slopes, Aidan, really steep, and there's no
Right.
way any animal as big as a deer could even get down there. So I thought badger, was it a badger or a otter maybe? But then it says an otter wouldn't be making that much noise, you know.
Right.
And sure enough, I walked up a little bit more and I turned back towards the bridge, and I seen a big set of green eyes looking at me, and it was standing on the side of this. I saw that I couldn't see nothing else.
I
I
would
just
view
said,
that as a confirmed sighting. That's definitely. You
I
know.
just seen a pair of eyes looking at me, and it was standing quite safely, Aidan, quite safely and quite comfortably on a steep embankment, which me and you would even go near would be straight down into the water. And it was standing, must have been holding on to a tree or something, but it was standing quite safely looking at me. And then I headed on down. I said, "Gotta get out of here." Headed back to
Definitely.
the car, and on the other side of the embankment, I heard bipedal walking the entire way until I got to the car. So I mean, that's your traditional troll under the bridge. But to me, that was a Bigfoot under the bridge. What would you say then about the theories on the troll under the bridge then?
The troll under the bridge. I have heard this before, and it goes back to misidentification. People describe what they feel or what they know. There's always been the stories, the Hans Christian Andersen, the ones from northwestern Europe, of trolls operating under bridges. So if somebody encounters something within a bridge type environment, Bigfoot could easily get in out of the water. They're hunting under the bridge, can't be seen. They're elusive. They don't want to be noticed.
Mm.
Go. Could somebody be misidentifying a, a troll within their folklore? Well, obviously, yeah. So, I mean, there's no real question that. If you look at across the world, you've got the orang pendek in Sumatra, you've got the Wendigo, Canada, Yowie, Australia, Sasquatch, America, Yarn, China, Skunk Ape, Yeti. They're all fairly similar. They're just tweaks to how people describe them.
Mm. Well,
These are all Bigfoots. Could the Northwestern European troll story be a Bigfoot effectively drinking water? When are most of these sightings? They're at night when people aren't around. They're normally someone on their own or with one other person who encounter these animals.
mm-hmm.
They're naturally elusive, is how Bigfoot is referred to. So they could easily, well, effectively, it's a good hiding place under a bridge. They know that. Go get some water, do some hunting for fish, and then disappear. They know that people aren't going to be able to go down steep embankments. And then
Mm-hmm.
somebody comes out of somewhere and encounters one. And it's just, oh, well, do you know what? X said that they encountered that troll, and then the troll becomes living in their mind. But could it be a misidentification? There's misidentifications all the time. So,
Mm.
of course, it could be.
And of course,
It's,
these two creatures that we have here in Ireland, that you touched on England briefly and Scotland briefly there, they're believed to be the same two species right across the British Isles. So right across Ireland, Scotland, England, Wales, there's there's believed to be two separate species. And of course, the woodlouse or woodawaza, as it's called in Europe, or the green man in England, is the same thing as what we have here called the
yes.
woodawaza. And of course, then there's grey man on top of that. Even the grey man has even been seen in northern England, even in East Anglia, has been seen the grey man. But specifically in England has been seen, especially where you were in Cumbria and the northeast as well. So obviously, Scotland sort of and down into the north of England rules the roost there with the grey man. Then Aidan.
Big environmental ecosystems to support Bigfoot populations in those areas. You're talking a lot of England effectively is developed, but the northwest isn't, and certain areas of Scotland aren't. So you're going to have more increased sightings where you don't have as much agriculture, where you have wild country, which is effectively where I believe Bigfoot operates, in wild country. And when we do have encounters, it's because we're encroaching on his habitat, and he's coming to be naturally inquisitive, or to protect his family, or for food or resource.
Well, of course, and like there's reports of the Green Man, as they would call it, or the wood moose as well. They would call the more Neanderthal looking type all over England, right? But as I say, there's been a couple of reports of the Grey Man that I know of in East Anglia, right, and even down into Devon. So that would suggest that the climate further south doesn't really come into the equation.
Well, food resource. If you go back to the point that I try to make, that I think that the Bigfoot population, the Grey Man, whatever we're describing, are fairly nomadic, and they go for food scavenging across the UK. 400 miles, 500 miles walking isn't huge for these animals. They have, I feel, natural endurance, and they could easily be seen across the same ones that are being described in Cumbria or Scotland could easily be down in the southeast, southwest of England. There's if you look at, I done research a number of years ago. There's a number of churches that have in where you're describing down in East Anglia, Norwich, around that way, Bury St Edmunds, that actually have pictures of what effectively are Bigfoots in stone from 700 years ago.
Yeah.
So how are they operating there? Within that environment, much more agricultural land around there, but there is, I suppose they're fairly coastal regions as well. Could a Bigfoot be following years-old trails like wolves do for food and resource? Yeah, I believe that. Could they be operating across the UK? Without question. In certain areas, there's too many sightings. There's too much evidence to suggest anything otherwise. But in the high volume sightings, encounters, evidence-based Bigfoot research, I feel that they're operating more in Cumbria, Scotland. And yes, you're going to get sporadic sightings. Whether or not they're the same family or the same ones, I don't know. But you're going to get sporadic sightings across heavily wooded areas across England. And why would they not move in the south? The weather changes, the climate changes, or they could go, one of their food resources might die in a certain season, and they might move down into another part of the country to look for different food.
Well, of course, up in Scotland, Scotland's more famous for the Loch Ness Monster, of course. But if you head just slightly east of Loch Ness, you'll come to Ben Macdui, and it's one of the. Is it maybe? It's not the tallest mountain in Scotland. It's maybe one of the tallest mountains in Scotland. But
Ben Nevis, I think, is the.
Ben Nevis, yeah. But if you head east of Loch Ness, you'll come to Ben Macdui, and of course the tales there of the big grey man of Ben Macdui. That is really where the legend comes from, in that part of the world anyway. And of course there are sightings there on numerous occasions, and they all seem to be grey Bigfoots up there. But
up in the Cairngorms, I have heard the theory before. The popular within folklore, the big grey man of Ben Macdui. I can remember it. That there seems to be a number of sightings up in that area. It's meant to haunt the summit of Ben Macdui.
It's the sort of thing, it's a thing there. I've seen pictures of it. People have described it. It always seems to be foggy up there. Now, whether it actually is foggy or it's just in the clouds because the mountains are so high, you're probably actually in the clouds. And people, seem to see it a lot coming out of the clouds, which would be quite spooky, I'd imagine.
Yeah, I'd say so. Being up a Scottish mountain and seeing a large grey man approaching you in fog would be the stuff of nightmares.
Yeah, definitely. It's not too bad in the woods, you sort of know, maybe you have a rough idea what it is. But if you're up at that height, I don't know what height Ben McDooey is. Obviously, it does play a mind on the amount of air into your system, and then seeing that at the same time, you would sort of think, "Am I seeing this?" Or
Of course, but it goes back to a number of people are seeing the same things at different times throughout centuries in the same places. It's I have heard the story of the Grey Man of Ben McDooey. He operates on the summits, and there is a theory where he helps some people, but he helps people in the Cairngorms find safety in land. So maybe that's just folklore.
But that has been known across the world for Bigfoot type creatures to actually help people out in distress. It has been known to happen.
Yeah, well, it has. They will guide people, direct people to safety. There is a number of people that have disappeared across the world, which in these situations now, whether they have get lost in it, or could that be another element of Bigfoot not being happy about people being within their territory?
But that always comes into the query, into the equation too. That obviously, just like people, there's good people, there's bad people. Well, but coming to Bigfoot, there's good Bigfoots and there's bad Bigfoots.
Yes, I definitely agree with that. I agree that if we keep taking liberties in certain areas where these creatures operate, and I feel that sometimes that they're unhappy with that, and a lot of disappearances in the woods, are down to, well, Bigfoot being unhappy. We have a number of disappearances in Ireland every year, definitely in Scotland, and across England in wild settings. Would Bigfoot be happy that we're going and taking his resources or disturbing his environment? I don't think there would be. But obviously, that's you can't say for definite, Jim. So it's unfair to label it as Bigfoot activity. People disappearing.
Yeah, well, there's definitely some connections. I think somewhere along the line, especially maybe over here in the Wicklow Mountains. I think Jim Bradley had touched on that before on a show somewhere. I think maybe a show with Vic Condiff or maybe with Brent Thomas. I'm not too sure, but I think he had touched on something that happened around the Wicklow Mountains, which didn't sort of add up, But Aidan, yourself now, before we're coming up here now, we're almost at the hour, but.
Right.
You're obviously a Belfast man, like you said at the start. So
yes.
You're from Titanic Town for all the American folks who like Titanic. That's where it was built. Aidan's from the town, and of course Belfast is just right below the Glens of Antrim, Aidan, and there's been a lot of reports up in the Glens of Antrim. A lot of structures found up there. And probably some of a few sort of famous photographs taken in that area as well. Is it an area that you've ever touched on, Aidan, or is it an area that you would like to touch on in the future? Or
I would obviously like to touch on. It's a beautiful part of the world. If you get the weather up there, it's as good as anywhere. Is there a Bigfoot operating in the huge expanse of the Glens of Antrim? Definitely. There's too many sightings, there's too much reports, there's too much activity, there's too much prints, there's too much nesting sites found for there not to be. Now, I think that one of this isn't a criticism. A lot of people are out Bigfooting on the Glens of Antrim at the minute, so I think that we're going to find something up around that way at some point next 24 months with whether it be an actual Bigfoot, but I think we'll find some hair samples and more prints up around the Glens. Definitely. Well, there's stuff coming out every day from it. But I would love to get up there for a few weeks, even do some videos, get some acoustics, get some knocks, and record some of the sites or some of the nests. Sorry.
I have to admit now, I'm not far from Belfast myself. I'm only 30 minutes drive down the road from Belfast in County Armagh, but it's an area that I have never squatched in myself. I've been through the area 100,000 times, driving through it and working. I've been up there working, but I've never had the chance to actually get into the woods up there, and I would love to do it myself. And maybe sometime if you're going in, we'll certainly arrange something and go with you. But
I definitely would do that. A lot of the Glens of Antrim, isn't public. A lot of it's private land. A lot of it's agriculture. So
Yeah.
it's probably the reason that you
Mm.
haven't been up. But the evidence and stuff, if you go online, it's huge now. It seems to be a very popular site. Maybe because it is close to Belfast and there's high population centres around it. People drive up and go squatching. Nothing wrong with that. If somebody can get some good acoustics or some prints, we might be the first to find strong, undeniable evidence up there. I would definitely be into that, Chris.
And of course, the forests actually start there literally. If I'm not sure if anybody's ever come into Belfast on the plane in the Belfast City Airport. If you're flying along the side of Belfast Lough, if you're on the right hand side of the plane, you can actually see the lens and you can see the forest. The forest actually starts on the northern coast of Belfast Lough and basically goes right to the top of Ireland. So
yes,
there's even been reports in the forest. I think it's above Carrickfergus. I'm not sure what the forest is named there. I think the next one up's Ballybully. That's Ballybully's at Lauren. So I'm not sure what the forest is called above Carrickfergus, Aidan, but there's actually been reports, structures, prints, and everything found in there, and that's like a stone throw from Belfast.
Yeah, well, I don't doubt that. I have seen on Facebook and other sites that there's people squatching there and finding stuff, but that close to a population centre, it's again more and more people are going out looking, and some of these people are actually going to find stuff close to Carrickfergus. I'm surprised at that. I didn't think a Bigfoot would come that close to
Well, that doesn't shock.
Center.
Yeah, that doesn't shock me, but it's the fact that it's so close to Belfast, which is a big population centre, because
yes,
my area here, the actual sighting that happened in my area in August 2017 was just over a quarter of a mile from town. It was literally right on the edge of the bog, and my thinking there is that the witness actually bumped into the watcher because it was during the day. It was during the day, and he actually has bumped into the watcher where the Bigfoot has been sitting watching, in case people were coming, and he actually didn't, because the witness actually came from the bog direction. The Bigfoot hadn't seen him until the last minute, and that's how it happened.
Yeah, it's same thing as what you're saying about the trolls under the bridge. People have just encountered them, and that's a Bigfoot taking his eye off the ball.
Yeah,
somebody's just walked upon them, which is how a lot of the encounters happen. So, but that's brilliant. Bigfoot, they're patient, and observing something else distracts them, and then somebody walks on top of them. Just lucky they didn't startle them or frighten them. Do you know what I mean? So there could be some
that particular
happening there.
Yeah, that particular witness there actually, he was walking up sort of a minute or two before this, and he heard what he thought was an animal being killed. So I think what the Bigfoot was doing was actually it was too busy making dinner.
Yeah.
To notice
that
him.
Sounds more likely distracted, concentrating on another issue, and somebody's just by pure chance.
Yeah.
So the Bigfoot's not. Well, it's concentrating on something else rather than someone approaching or watching the area.
Mm-hmm. And then he got the feeling, where obviously it got up and it stood right in front of him, right, literally in front of him, or within arm's length.
That'd be terrifying. It would also be an amazing experience.
Yeah, but he got the feeling. I think so too. The Bigfoot was just worried that he was going to steal dinner on him. That's all the Bigfoot was worried about.
I wouldn't like to take a Bigfoot's dinner, Chris. That would be the last.
That's the sort of thing. Yeah, you're not getting my dinner.
Oh, so you're not going to outrun us, are you? You're not going to outstrength us.
No, so he just sort of went into reverse.
My God,
yeah,
I'd love to encounter such like that.
Yeah, well, he went into reverse basically the whole way back, and it was to watch them the entire time. And then eventually he turned around and it was gone, But that was literally a quarter of a mile from town. So it doesn't doubt me that if us guys went up into southeast Antrim, and further up, that they would be right across that area,
It's go back to Ireland's sparsely populated. There's massive rural areas that can sustain, because that's not too far from where the antlers were found, by the way.
Mm-hmm.
Huge animals were roaming this place. And could there be offshoots operating? Of course there is. There's too many sightings. There's too much evidence.
Mm-hmm.
and we're eventually going to find one.
Definitely. So it's only a matter of time before we get some sort of decent evidence, you know.
Yeah.
You know.
I think we have decent evidence. You know, I honestly do. Is it, you know, proven beyond all doubt? Possibly not, but you know, I think there is good evidence. People aren't making these stories up, Chris. You know, people are seeing them. These prints are being created by people. They're being created by these animals.
Mm-hmm.
That's what I feel. I think that the evidence is very strong.
Definitely. Well, Aodhan, my friend, we're almost up on the hour, and I'm sure as the listeners here have been listening, they can clearly know that me and you could talk all night on this. And
well, you know, I was going to go into the habitat conspiracy where Bigfoot was a protected species up until the 70s in certain countries, but due to environmental concerns in their habitat, they sort of tried to put it into mythology. But that'll be a topic for another time, Chris.
Yeah, but as I say, you can clearly know, guys listening to us here, that we're clearly not finished with this conversation. So we're going to have Aodhan back in a couple of weeks' time, and finish off the story. We'll do a second show, Aodhan. We'll finish off the story, and you can continue on what you were going to talk about there, the conspiracies and different things.
Yeah, well, that was just another topic that there were some documents found that in the 70s, and they were in French in Canada, where the 3 large countries were going to take Bigfoot off the protective species list, and to protect habitat for logging and mining. It's an interesting topic. And then from that point on, they put it into like mythology and folklore. But we can discuss that another time.
Definitely, we'll definitely do that, and hopefully next time then we'll maybe go into a wee bit deeper on some of the actual reports and encounters here, and maybe some of the, if you wanted to touch on some even across the world. But definitely,
excellent. I would love to, Chris. That would be brilliant.
Yeah, and maybe we'll get your views on some of those encounters. I know we've touched on briefly one encounter there in my local area. We touched briefly on that just there now, but maybe next time round, guys, then Aodhan will come back on and we'll discuss the conspiracies that he was chatting about there. We'll go deep into some of the encounters. We'll get Aodhan's point of view on those, and we'll dig a bit deeper then. But Aodhan, thank you very much for coming on. I know
you're Chris. Brilliant to talk to you.
You've taken time out of your busy schedule to come and chat to us, so thank you very much.
Oh, excellent. Anytime. It's a subject I love, and we shall find the Irish Bigfoot.
Hopefully.
We will. We will.
But guys, thank you very much for listening. Thank you very much for listening, guys. It's been Aodhan MacArtain you've been listening to. You can go check out his book again on Amazon Prime. What's the book called there again, Aodhan, just to recap?
Bigfoot Collective Discourse in the Internet Age.
Lovely. So if you get the Amazon Prime, guys, you can get that, and you can take a read at that between now and the next time Aodhan's on. And we shall see you. As I said before, this hopefully will be a pretty regular show. We can't promise that because we all have a lot on our plates. We've got.
I understand, gentlemen. Anytime, just give me some notice, and I'll make myself available, Chris.
Yeah, sure. But thank you once again, people, for listening. And that was Aodhan MacArtain, and this is Talk Bigfoot with the ABRO. And it's good night from me, and it's good night from Aodhan too.
Good night.
Thank you very much, guys.